evening, everyone. I'm Achal Dua, Senior Consultant with EBC Learning. Warm welcome to you all to this workshop on key points to remember when drafting SLPs. This is the second day of the workshop, and yesterday we had a very informative discussion on the preparing for leading cases, the tips, techniques, and the strategy. If you have missed something yesterday, I think you can watch it on YouTube. We will be soon releasing the recording. Through these two workshops, our aim is to guide you on how to read the cases and use it while drafting, and particularly how to draft SLPs. Today's workshop will be again taken by our two experts, an advocate on record, Ms. Pallavi Pratap and Dr. Charu Mathur. A brief introduction of our speakers for you today. Pallavi Pratap is an advocate on record and managing partner of Pratap and Company, a law firm which is focused on litigation and alternative dispute remedy. She was chosen as 40 under 40 lawyers and legal influencers by Business World magazine. Many congratulations, Pallavi. I was looking at your pictures yesterday. Many congratulations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dua. Thank you so much.
She has over a decade of experience and regularly appears before the Honorable Supreme Court and High Court. She's an MBA in finance from La Trobe University, Melbourne, Australia, and also a former investment banker. She has been actively involved in cases pertaining to company law, insolvency, bankruptcy, environment, and arbitration laws, to name a few. Welcome again, Pallavi. Yesterday's session was a brilliant session, and we are hoping to have another session with you today with the same spirit. Our next panelist is Dr. Charu Mathur. Dr. Charu Mathur has a rich and diverse expertise in corporate, commercial, civil, criminal, and constitutional law matters. She is an advocate on record, Supreme Court of India. She has represented parties, which includes cricketing bodies and educational institutions like IIT Jodhpur, NLU Jodhpur, and other private engineering and medicine colleges of Gujarat and Orissa. Dr. Charu has also authored various courses at EBC Learning. She has done courses on company law, various modules on company law, insolvency, and her latest one is on Negotiable and Limitation Act, and it is a must to check out. She is also conducting, as I've told yesterday also, that she's also conducting a 2-week crash course, which is starting on 1st of November. And it is on a preparation of your course. Now, without any further delay, I will just hand it over to Dr. Charu first. Dr. Charu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dua. Good evening to everyone. Hi, Pallavi. Yeah. Just again, I'm in Rajasthan, and again that internet problem due to the examination is there. Today I have joined using WebEx, but I am turning my video off as I'm trying to. But here again, the key is to read the question. In fact, you should first read what you are supposed to do. So if they are asking you to just write the synopsis, or if you are asked to just write the question of law or the grounds, you have to do that much only. And it is only a 3-hour papers with at least 4 questions to do. So effectively, you have to draft 4 problems, solution to that. Some can be a SLP, one can be writ, one can be a transportation or a bail application or an interim relief, how to ask. We will be discussing this in our crash course also, but today we will listen from Pallavi how to prepare this particular paper. I remember when I had written my AOR exam in 2007-2008, I had to draft a writ petition, a public interest writ petition. So you have to keep in mind various rules regarding PIL, the latest guidelines, latest circulars, and how to go about the drafting part. There has been a change, like in the earlier times, we used to file a separate application for getting the interim relief. Now that has changed. So whatever the guidelines, whatever is the format, you must know it in depth. Now over to Pallavi.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I hope I'm audible and visible. So today I'm actually excited about the drafting session that we are supposed to look at. And even though we are just talking about how to draft an SLP, I would also I was actually going through the previous AOR exam papers, and I realized that the questions which are coming are primarily, ranging around the important cases which took place, let's say, an year in precedence to whenever the examination was to be taken up. So obviously before starting with the entire SLP part of it, I just thought that if we can quickly go through a few cases which I feel from drafting perspective would be important is definitely, PIL, like Dr. Charu Mathur said, PIL or a writ petition would definitely be, in some manner of speaking, it will definitely come as a question. I think second that I've been observing is that they have been asking to draft a counter affidavit. I think if you get a question which is around the drafting of a counter affidavit, I think it will be a very safe bet for you, because there you would not really have to get into the entire works of SLP, that is the synopsis, the list of date, the question of law, the ground, everything. So so basically it as a strategy, it can work in terms of saving time, that in counter you would not really have to break it down into so many headers. And two, I think it will be one of those safe questions to attempt, that you can look to if you have to choose between a tough question and an easy one. I would suggest that a counter affidavit would be good question to attempt. Then I have a feeling, I don't know if I'm correct or not, but I have a feeling that last year that Riya Chakrabarti case that had taken place, which was filed in a transfer petition, I think something around that might come. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that because it was a transfer petition, we were looking at a transfer of investigation. I feel that that was a case where there was a lot of drafting skill which was required. As a matter of fact, if you would read that judgment also of Hrishikesh Roy, the single bench judgment that had come, that actually gives you. Uh, so how he has on how Justice Roy has written it down uh, um, is basically using those grounds also, and he's tried to inculcate the primary factors as far as that transfer petition is concerned, and whether or not it is maintainable. So I think if you all get time, definitely have a look at that judgment specifically. I have a feeling that it might come. I may be wrong also. Uh, um, that is the second point, the important point that I could think of before starting with SLP. And the third point, I personally, when I had to take the examination, so what I had done was that I was going through cursorily for all the important judgments which were reported in that specific year. So when you go through those judgments, I mean, if you can spare, let's say, 2 weekends, for instance, in just 2 weekends, go through the Supreme Court website and look at the judgments which have come in the past. You can maybe even go on Live Law or other such resources. The important judgments that have come, if you would go through those judgments once, one, it will help you in your leading cases also, because you can cite a reference to a latest judgment in that. I'm not saying that you go through the entire judgment, but just to get an idea. And second, it will help you with drafting also, because if there is any judgment that makes you think that, okay, this is thoda sa hatke, as in it is a little different, you can look at that judgment in toto if you have that much time. So typically you'll see that in any of the judgments that come, you will find that they will the honorable judges always have the extract of the prayer which is given, so that really helps you with drafting your own prayer, specifically if you're looking at an interim prayer. Now these are just quick tips that I wanted to give. And now moving on to how to draft an SLP. I'm sure most of you would have drafted at least a couple of SLPs in your life so far. I remember when I had started off and when I had to start drafting SLP and other, drafting which typically one has to undertake if you are practicing in Supreme Court. I remember somebody told me that, Pallavi, the day you will finish off 100 drafting, then you will have that confidence that you can draft anything. And I think, yeah, by the time I reached 50, 55, that confidence had come in. But initially, definitely, I think drafting in SLP looks like a very daunting task. Mostly because, if you would see a typical SLP that is drafted by any given AOR, you will see that what they do is that they'll put in grounds, and those grounds will be then copy pasted in the synopsis also, or they'll put in question of law, and those question of law will be copied and again pasted in the grounds, as if there is no distinction between the two. My suggestion is that we must keep all of this. If you have to do a very good drafting, then you should look at it as individual sections of the larger petition. Now, two important things. When you are asked a question, like Dr. Mathur said, when you are asked a question, just read exactly what has been asked. So if they've asked you only to write the grounds, then please, by all means, only write the grounds. Don't go by writing synopsis and list of date, etc. The other thing is that don't start by writing in the Honorable Supreme Court of India, Civil Appellate Jurisdiction, whatever. Don't write all of that. You just have to write the petitioners and the respondent's name, as in, how you write the cause title. That's about it. You don't have to write down most respectfully, Shweta. That all of that part you can actually choose to miss, for the simple reason that when there is a specific question that has come for the grounds, then you have to look at it from the perspective of grounds. You do not really have to essentially move forward and draft the entire SLP. Also, before I go ahead, I'll be happy if you've got any questions. You can send it in the chat box, and we'll keep taking it up simultaneously. So now, moving forward, I don't know how you, typically, all of you, or Dr. Mathur has her way of drafting, but how I prefer to draft is that I typically start with a list of date, because when I'm doing a list of dates, it becomes easier for me to realize what are the important dates, what are the important annexures that I have to mark. Now, this discussion that I'm having is about drafting, especially petition. It is from both the perspectives. As a practitioner, let's say tomorrow, even if you're not a practicing AOR, but you engage some other AOR and you're still drafting an SLP, you should know exactly how to do it. And also from examinations perspective. So I might be talking about both the things. It's just to encompass the entire structure. So moving on, first thing that I typically always do is start with the list of dates. I find that as a practitioner, it becomes easier for you to see what are the documents that you want to annex, and if there are any specific documents that you want to rely upon which are missing. So this helps you to get all the documents together in one place. But if now that is from the practitioner's perspective, if I have to talk about it from the examination perspective, you will definitely have to write the synopsis first. Okay. So because it says that synopsis, list of date, question of law, and the grounds. So I would suggest that you may want to, let's say, leave a little bit space before for synopsis. Don't write, don't jump into the synopsis immediately. Maybe you can look at, say, leaving 1 page or so for the synopsis, and start with the list of date first. Because if at all there is an important list of date that you have to put in, you can definitely have those dates and what actually the event or whatever it is that occurred on that specific date, you can write it down. Now, why I'm saying this is that when you are putting in the list of date, right, it gives you an understanding of a matter in a quicker manner. If you go and directly start writing synopsis, it might not really, do justice to the thoughts that are coming to your head. See, when we start attempting a question, it is not necessary that, you will have the entire picture in your head immediately. So, if you start with the easier part at the first or the initial stage, which is the list of date, then that will give you enough time to contemplate also on what all you would want to put, what all you want to put into the synopsis, and what are the question of law you would want to look at, and the grounds that you would want to look at. There is a question that has come. I'm just taking it up just now. We can write list of date without having an Aisha for specific date or without any proof related to specific date. See, when you're as a practitioner, you can definitely put in, dates without annexing the annexures in case those annexures are not required. But mostly, I would suggest that if you see that a specific event has taken place where documentary evidence is available, then I would definitely suggest that you put it. For instance, if I have a criminal SLP and there is a postmortem or an inquest that has taken place that I'm relying upon, then you have to you definitely annex it. See, at the end of the day, you have to make your case stronger, and that only gets by when you have all the important annexures at least marked in it. Now, moving on, so like I said, when we're talking about list of dates, you need to make sure that the first thing I would do is to start with the list of date, because it becomes easier. You get the dates and you get the the important events marked. Now, once you've done the list of date, then you would be in a position to know um, how you would want to take it forward in terms of let's say question of law and the grounds. Now, always ensure that as far as question of law is concerned, you do not put it as a ground. Try and understand the distinction between the question of law and the ground. Now, a question of law has to be something which you feel is important for the court to decide upon. It is important that that question, specifically pertaining to the interpretation of a law, is answered. Now, why I was saying that you should read at least, the judgments which have come in last 1 year is because when you're drafting a question of law, you can then say that whether, how it is that you use, whether the honorable court has failed to appreciate the ratio in such and such. So you would, even if you don't remember the citation, correct? If you're still able to write down the leading case name in a specific, as far as you're dealing with a question of law, I think that will definitely give you brownie points. So that is one thought that had come into my mind in terms of if you have enough time to read it. So that is one part of it, that you should sort of know exactly how you would want to deal with a specific question of law. Now, when you're dealing with leading cases, like we discussed yesterday, most of the leading cases you will get an understanding about what that leading case basically pertains to and what is the ratio which is there. So since you would know it, try and incorporate that in your question of law. Now, if they say that no, okay, you don't have to write the question of law, you only have to write the ground part of it, then try to look at grounds from make grounds from the facts which are there, or make grounds from the merit of the case. Because when we are talking about ground, we should not be making superficial grounds, like, for instance, a specific ground becomes repetitive in nature, or any specific ground where we're just manipulating the words, but the sense of it remains the same. Don't do that. Let's say, for instance, if there is an NDPS case that you have, and you are talking about, let's say, the possession of the amount of the contraband that has been found. How is it that you're going to deal with it? So there are there are basically grounds that will always be in your head as far as NDPS is concerned, with respect to possession, with respect to quantity, with respect to how was it recovered, how was the recovery done. So these are like 4-5 grounds that will always be there. So these grounds you can that should instantly come into your head. For instance, I was looking at a question paper which was there in last year. This is the 2018 question paper, where they have put in the IBC provisions, and they've asked you to draft a civil appeal, right? Now, always remember that there is a distinction between a civil appeal and an SLP. More or less, if you look at it from practitioner's perspective, it is mostly it is the same that you would find in terms of what are the grounds that you will be looking at as far as appeal is concerned. But I would suggest that some important judgments which have come just now as far as IBC is concerned, if you can take out time, then go through them, so that if there is a civil appeal that comes in, you will always know the points that you can use as far as appeal drafting is concerned, especially as far as synopsis is concerned. So, for instance, you can look at Lalit Kumar Jain judgment. I think that is an important judgment as far as personal guarantee is concerned. You can also look at Indus Biotech. I think Indus Biotech is important because there they've talked about arbitration, an arbitration petition being, referred in an NCLT proceeding, and as to how and when the CIRP actually commences. So Indus Biotech is important as far as IBC is concerned. You can look at the Jaswal judgment, which is about the balance sheet and its whether or not acknowledgement, any debt which is mentioned in the balance sheet, can that be still considered as an acknowledgement or not. Then you should look at, I think JP Kensington is an important judgment because that also works both ways in terms of a larger writ petition where home buyers are concerned, and also from the perspective of IBC. So I think that is an important judgment. These, I'm just telling you, you can make smaller points for your own self, so that when you are writing it down in a synopsis, you are able to at least refer to those ratios which are there. Mr. Vyas, I will take your questions at the end. All right. Now, the important question is with respect to, so this is the point that I was telling you with respect to IBC. Now, similarly, look at arbitration judgments which have come recently, or you make a small set of, let's say, 10 recent judgments which have come as far as arbitration is concerned. All right, so when you've got those 10 judgments, go through it and look at the important grounds and important findings, because those can actually help you when you're drafting your synopsis. Why it will help you, or when you're supposed to, let's say, write your grounds, because these are ready references that you will have. So, for instance, like I said, if it is a criminal matter, then you should know that if it is an NDPS matter, 1 or 2 grounds will always come, or 2 to 3 grounds will always be there. So that becomes important for you. Similarly, if it is a bail application, then how is it that you're going to show, if you're, let's say, filing for an anticipatory, what are the 3 important points? You look at Chidambaram's judgment and you go ahead and say that flight risk is there, tampering of witness is concerned, etc., etc. You try and look at it from that perspective, and those 3 grounds then become important grounds for you to mention. So these are all your ready grounds. It definitely is a little tedious task to have these kind of compilations. But I think, moving forward, of course, it's not important that you become an AOR or not in order to practice in Supreme Court. At least now it's not so much, but you should at least know these rounds. So when this ready reference is there with you, you can always look at it, and you can always refer it even when you are working as a practitioner and not necessarily as an AOR. Yeah. Moving on. So I personally would suggest that look at arbitration related case laws. Look at I think look at arbitration related case laws, then look at IBC related case laws, look at criminal jurisprudence specifically with respect to anticipatory bails, because anticipatory bail and bail jurisprudence, you will see what had happened was when we had lockdown, maximum cases which were coming were with respect to criminal matters. Now, because of that, you will see that in recent times, a little bit of bail jurisprudence has evolved in terms of specifically when you look at anticipatory bail provisions. So that I feel there are quite a few. Like Siddharth is there. Look at Siddharth versus State of UP. Look at Amanpreet. Look at this latest judgment which has come from by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul. Look at that. Those judgments will help you with anticipatory bail. So Sheila Agrawal, definitely you have to look at. When you look at those, then you will get those specific grounds which will be ready for you if you have to write for a 438. If let's say it's a 136 which is being filed against a rejection of an anticipatory bail. Now, so that's one way of doing it. Moving on, if you have to write down the grounds, look at the merit of the case. All right. One of the problems that I feel when I was reading the question paper was that the question can be very it can be a stickler in the sense that it's just maybe it's just 10 lines which is there. So don't try to imagine a scenario in your head. All right. If you are imagining a scenario in your head which is not there in the question, then you're basically traveling beyond the scope of the question. And try and check yourself with that. So for instance, if there is a 302 sort of a case which has come, or let's say anything to that effect comes, don't try and imagine that, okay, maybe the postmortem says this, or the inquest says this, or the case diary may have this, or etc., etc. So don't try to imagine those. Just stop yourself if you feel that maybe you are using your imagination. And in case you are using your imagination while you're trying to draft, then do write it down that assuming such and such, therefore such and such, right? So don't get carried away with an assumption that is there only in your head, but it's actually not given in the question paper. I at least felt that while I was taking the examination, or at least reading beforehand, I used to sort of get that I would try and assume things which was not really there. So I think if you can stop yourself, that will be really nice. Now, that is the other important point I wanted to tell you. Now, we've covered the list of date part of it. We've also covered the question of law part of it. Like I said, if you remember leading cases and the ratio, do mention it. It's brownie points. If you do not, then don't worry about it. You don't remember the specific case law, don't worry about it. You can write that this honorable court in a similar judgment or in a similar matter, or you can write in Katina of judgments, this honorable court has held it. If you remember the ratio correctly, don't just if you're not very confident about the ratio, please try and not write it, because in case it is a wrong understanding of the ratio, then that might go against you. Now, with respect to question of law, the other important point that I wanted to say was when you're looking at a specific point, for instance, let me just give you I will just tell us an SLP question which was asked last year. And, they can also ask you about in which scenario an SLP lies and in which scenario, let's say, a civil appeal or a criminal appeal lies. So remember that also. That's important not only from the perspective of practice and procedure, but it is also important from the perspective of drafting, because they may give you a scenario and say that you must draft an appropriate petition. So you would not know if it is a civil appeal or an SLP. Now here, there is this question which had come, which is quite exhaustive, but this was with respect to, I'm just going to actually, my screen share is still not working, but I'm going to just very quickly read this, the important parts of it. So if you have it handy, then it is page 15 of the 2018 question paper, which is X and his father Budhia lived in village such and such. Bholu Chanchal's stepbrother of such and such lived in village Bandi in Raebareli, etc. Bholu had about 4 bighas of pasture land and 7 bighas of cultivated land, etc. They go on and tell you about this entire story, that he had several daughters who were all married off. Then he talks about this gentleman X who comes in. Now look at, if you have that question handy, you have to be very careful when you are looking at every single incident that is taking place here, specifically from the perspective of list of dates. All right. So every single incident that you see, I hope you have it handy. Otherwise, you can download it from Supreme Court's website. I'm just sharing the link on the chat box so that you can all look at it once. Okay, so here you can download it from here and you can see this. Now, this one here, every single paragraph has at least, the dates are not there, but they have certain events which are important. So try and incorporate that in your list of dates as events, because remember that a list of date is not actually just a list of date. It writes as list of dates and events, right? So you can definitely use those events to show a narrative which makes sense, right? And from when you're writing those list of dates, so specific areas or specific points you can use for your synopsis at the same time. One of the ways of doing it would be, so let's say, for instance, if you've written a specific list of date, try and see if that raises any sort of a question of law. If it does, then write it down in the question of law part of it. If you feel that no, it doesn't raise any question of law, put it down in the grounds. So what I'm trying to say here is, you've got one question, which is, let's say, the SLP that you have to draft. Leave aside 2 pages for synopsis. Then start with your list of date. Now, a typical list of date, looking at the kind of questions, looking at the events which are mentioned in this, and depending upon your handwriting, it would probably be between 3 to 4 pages. All right. So the first 2 pages you can leave for synopsis. The next 3 to 4 pages you can leave for list of date. Then after you've left those 4 pages, then you write it down as question of law. Leave 2 pages for question of law. And then after 2 pages, just write down grounds in case all the 4 things are asked. If all the 4 things are not asked, then you have to only write synopsis. Like, for instance, in this question, they've asked, please draft a special leave petition on behalf of X along with synopsis and interim relief. They very clearly say that list of date, certificate, and affidavit are not required. In case they ask for a list of date, then this is the strategy that you should use, that you leave synopsis and then use a certain few pages for synopsis and few pages for list of date. In case they don't ask it, then you can directly go ahead and start with your synopsis. Now, I would suggest that if you're writing a synopsis, but I mean, if I were to do it, if I were to do a sort of a synopsis, what I would have done is the first paragraph would, of course, be that, your standard paragraph that you use. If you don't want to use a standard paragraph, try and incorporate the gist of the entire matter within one paragraph, which should be about, let's say 7 to 10 lines. Within 7 to 10 lines, try and incorporate the entire crux of the matter. That should be your first paragraph. If not, if you feel that it requires more, then use 2 paragraphs. Then after you, and this I'm talking about synopsis, so just bear that in mind. Then once you've put in those 2 paragraphs, which have a gist of the matter, put in brief facts of the case in the synopsis itself, right? Once you've put in those brief facts of the case, very cursorily define all the important events which have taken place as far as that specific question is concerned. So maybe I would suggest that if you have to only write synopsis, try and put in brief facts of case in if it is exhaustive, in about 3 to 4 paragraphs. If it's not very exhaustive, try to put it in 1 to 2 paragraphs, and that's about it. Now, in this case that I have referred to on page 15, I felt that because this has a huge, the question itself is very exhaustive, you can write the brief facts of case in about 2 to 3 paragraphs. Just look at only important points and not deal with the entire, facts which are given. Don't try to copy paste it. Don't try to just blindly write it down, but put it in your own words. I suggest that would be a great place to start with. Now, once you've done your brief facts of case in the synopsis itself, go ahead and after that you write that major grounds on which you wish to, challenge the impugned judgment, and there you put in all the grounds that you feel are important. Now, here is the trick. You cannot, write all the grounds in big paragraphs. Try to avoid writing grounds in bigger paragraphs, let's say for 3 or 4 lines or more than that. Try and write your grounds as simply worded as possible, and as concise as you can. Because the more you elaborate on a single ground, ideally you can actually make at least 2 or 3 grounds out of a single big paragraph. So try to use it innovatively, that your grounds actually become smaller and more in number. Now, I am sure you will say that what is she talking about? Why do we need more numbers of ground? But believe me, I think just as it matters to the client that you've got more and substantial grounds in it, it is important also while you're writing that you have numbers always matter. So, I mean, if you have to write grounds in a matter, especially as far as the AOR examination is concerned, and try to at least look at 8 to 10 grounds that you can make, and try and use your creativity in terms of using the leading cases and how you could draw parity between what is asked and if there is an application of a leading case that you can use in that specific area. So, like I said, if you have to only write down synopsis, make the introduction in 2 paragraphs, list of date, as in don't put in as list of date, just write it down as brief facts leading to the case. Put in about 3 paragraphs with respect to what all had transpired in before the filing of the SLP, and then you move on to grounds. Now, if you can see some question of law that you feel that these are important question of law, which comes to you instantly. You can write it down. Uh, and this is tricky. I don't know how you would manage it. What I had done was I left about four lines for it. But after the first two introduction paragraphs, I had written down that this case raises some important questions of law, and there I put in two to three questions of law that came instantly to my mind. So primarily, when you've been asked only to write a synopsis, try and incorporate everything, but in as concise manner as possible. So that's about the synopsis part of it. See, at the end of the day, synopsis, we have to look at brevity. It is not that, synopsis has to be running into, let's say, A to Z. As in, if you draft an SLP, you would know that from A to Z, you basically get your synopsis and list of data. And otherwise, if it is more than that, then you have to file an application for it. In this case, you should look at, finishing off your synopsis in about 4 to 5 pages, and that's about it. Now, moving on to the interim relief part of it. Always ensure that when you are writing any sort of an interim relief that you're praying for, what is it that comes to your mind first? When you read the question, you will realize that, and always before attempting a question, always read it at least twice. Just as, when we draft anything, let's say, for instance, an SLP, or if you're filing a civil appeal, you will always look at the impugned order at least 2 or 3 times before you start drafting. Similarly, read the question at least 2 to 3 times, because the first time that you read something, it would not give you that clarity. But the second time when you read something, it sort of gives you, it's like Nirvana strikes, and you realize, okay, yeah, this is maybe what they actually mean by a certain line. So be careful with while you're reading the question, because there can be trick questions where you may feel that a question is asked in a certain manner, but actually the intent of the question is something else. Now, with respect to interim relief, I would suggest that when you read a question, right, you will get to know at that point in time only that this is the interim relief that I have to look for. So, for instance, if there is a bill that somebody is asking for, so you know that, if it is a bail provision, you look at it and you can put it in your interim relief. Or if there is anything that you are looking in terms of a civil dispute, look at what could be the stay of operation of a particular event, write it down like that. So I think interim relief is not the most difficult thing to look at, but it is the most I don't know what do you call it. It's the most itchy thing as to how you word it. It has to be worded in such a manner that it does not travel beyond the scope of the question that is asked. At any given stage, as practicing lawyers, we've always noticed that one of the first things that a judge would do is read the prayer. So your prayer should always be worded in such a manner that it helps in getting the exact relief that you're looking for. Now, every time that you're asking for any specific prayer, always make sure that the grounds that you're using actually corroborate to it. A lot of times I've seen that, we add on grounds which were never, pleaded in courts below. Especially when it is a 136 jurisdiction, you have to be very careful with it. My suggestion is that if, let's say, and this is from the practitioner's perspective, but my suggestion is that if you feel that there is an additional ground that you want to raise which was never pleaded, or if there is any additional document which was never relied upon, you should always file an IA for placing or bringing on record the additional documents and additional facts or additional grounds. But you should always avoid putting any additional ground in your SLP. So many times this happens before the honorable judges that they will go and say that, this was a ground that you never pleaded. How is it that you put it in your grounds as far as SLP is concerned? So always be very wary of it, because they feel then that you're trying to mislead the court. If that is not your intention, then try and avoid putting any ground which has not been pleaded before. Or any document which has not been brought on record as far as the lower court is concerned. That and for that, in case you have to bring it, you make sure that you're filing an IA for additional documents. So now I have basically covered a little bit of what my understanding of an SLP is. I'm just going to take up the questions that have come. Swapnil has asked, both civil and criminal SLP can present in, yes, of SLP is 136. As you told, civil appeal and SLP both will have to present in Supreme Court under different section or same under provision of SLP. See, sir, civil appeal will happen as far as the particular code is concerned. So if I'm looking at an IBC provision, please look at what is the provision there for approaching in an appeal in Supreme Court. Please try and understand that an appeal comes from a specific code or from a specific law. Look at that and then figure out how you're going to draft a civil appeal. Now, there is another question. Along with SLP, it's required to submit SLP submission application for getting permission for SLP submission. If you, okay, I will actually change the question that you've asked in terms of, in terms of what you've written down. If, let's say, there is an impugned order and you are not party to that impugned order, but that order is going to affect you and affect your right, then you can file something which is called as permission to file an SLP, right? If you're not party to a specific SLP, to a specific impugned order, then you file something which is a permission. Like, for instance, I remember we'd done a case, the Hadia case, where the husband was not party in the impugned order, but he was the one who had filed the SLP. And at that point in time, because he was not party, we filed permission to file an SLP. So that is also one way of, approaching under 136. But that is subject to the bench allowing whether or not that permission is granted. Now, with respect to High Court certificate required for filing SLP, in my practice, I've rarely come across something like that. So it is definitely the rules say so, but in SLP jurisdiction right now, we get the impugned order and we draft one and file. Now, Prashant Kumar ji has asked, for the purpose of SLP, what would be ideal number of pages for each section for the purpose of writing response to questions in exam? All right, so I have understood something here, Prashant ji, when I've seen all the previous year questions, that they are not burdening you with asking for all the 4 sections of it. It's not that they are asking you to write synopsis, list of date, ground, etc., everything. You have to, if they are asking only important in a specific part of it. So, for instance, if they are asking for synopsis, look at about 5 to 6 pages, depending upon your handwriting. Now, if it is a big, you sort of have a very cursive handwriting and it's big, then try to add on. But if you have, a medium-sized handwriting, then look at about 6 to 7 pages. I think that will be sufficient. This is inclusive of the interim relief also, which, let's say, for instance, in this question they've asked. Now, if it is a list of date, make sure that you're using every single list of date, every single important date and event in your list of date. Don't miss out, because, even if you miss out on a single event, that might, if that's not going to give you plus 20 marks, it can definitely result in minus 20 marks. So even if you feel that something is most irrelevant, try and incorporate it as an event, because you never know what the examiner might consider important and what the examiner might not consider important. Now, that was with respect to list of date. As far as so list of date, I can't really tell you how many pages you should be filling in, but because that is dependent upon the dates and events, just make sure that you don't miss out on any event. That's my word of advice. Moving on to question of law, I feel if there is a question that comes on major question of law, just make sure that you are covering every single question of law that comes into in your mind with respect to a scenario which is given. So for instance, I would say that anywhere between 7 to 8 good question of law is an ideal number to look at. But I understand that when you do not have resources like SCC Online with you, or EBC, or any of these things that actually assist you while you're drafting, you can look at about 3 to 5, but very concrete and very effective question of law. Now that's about question of law. In case you come to grounds and they've asked you to only, if they've asked you only to put in grounds, then ensure that because if there are 4 questions, you get about 45 minutes. Make sure that you're putting in good 15 to 20 grounds, because I think if you've got about 45 minutes to attempt one single question only with respect to grounds, I think that's a good number that you should look at. But don't be repetitive. Don't say that this is arbitrary, the impugned order is arbitrary, or this is arbitrary, that is arbitrary. No, that is not a ground. Make substantiated. Because you are a practitioner in Supreme Court, substantiate it with a case law, or substantiate it with a provision. I have noticed in the 2018 question paper that they've given the important provisions in the footnotes. I think that's a good place to look at, because then you would, even if you don't remember all the sections which are relevant, if the sections which are important are given in the footnotes, do rely upon it and write it down in your grounds also, and also in your question of law. Now, a trick that I typically use when I am drafting, let's say, a question of law, is I always look at, if there are case laws that I feel where the ratio is clear, but unfortunately the impugned order has not captured it or has not understood it clearly, then I will always mention that. I will always rely upon the provision which is there. So if I see 438, I will definitely rely upon the provision, and I will definitely rely upon the wording of the provision. So that sort of if you're looking at provision, and if you're looking at a case law and you're relying upon it, then I think that should always go in question of law. Grounds is where you should always look at the merit of the case, right? Merit of case being why is it that a specific SLP or an appeal is important? Now, for instance, if let's say an IBC provision is there and we are looking at overriding effect, then look at 238 and put 238 and its definition of whatever little that you know in the question of law. Then you go in the ground and you can define the 238 provision in terms of the merit of the case. That why is it that there is an overriding provision, and how it is adversely affecting you, right? So I think this should sort of give you an understanding of it. I hope I've been able to explain it, I mean, in whichever manner that I could. Dr. Mathur, if you would want to add something in this.
Thank you, Pallavi, for your very insightful lesson, and it is learning for each one of us. So, just to add on the list of dates, because I think
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
forget that I'm doing my crash course. So, you must remember if you have been asked to draft a list of dates for a SLP or for a writ petition. Because when we draft for the SLP, we mark elections in the list of date itself. But while we draft writ petitions, we don't mark it in the list of date, but it is done as the facts that we give in the body of the matter. So that is one aspect. And from the point of view of examination, I remember that we were asked to write, I think, certificate that we give, which no one actually reads. The certificate that is SOAR has to give that it is the true facts and everything. So you might be asked to draft that certificate also. And as far as grounds, the paper has explained. So from the see at the end of the day, you remember that it is an examination you are writing. So the examiners would like to see as many grounds as are there. Same goes for question of law. Maybe in practice you might not be actually writing. And then coming on to the prayer part, prayer has to be meticulously drafted because over the years I have realized on Monday, Friday, first they ask where is your prayer. So first thing you have to mark when you make your brief is page number on such and such is your prayer. So prayer and interim prayer, that is to be marked meticulously, and even in the paper one, which is a practice and procedure, you do get many a times to draft an interim prayer, right? So strictly they should not ask, but it is very often I have seen in the past papers it is asked. And one more point that I would like to harp upon is building up your vocabulary as a lawyer. So this leading cases will give you a good opportunity to build the language of a lawyer which you can employ. And drafting paper, people are really scared of this paper, right? But if you look that they give you provision, so you can make question of laws. You have to just keep your cool and have a good writing because most of the time people are not able to finish the paper only. So each question is of 25 marks. 4 papers you have to write. 4 questions you have to write. So you have to actually plan out, right? It is not, you have to finish the paper. That is also an important target for the candidates. So that's all, and hope to see you in our crash course that we are launching starting from 1st of November.
I think, ma'am, in your crash course also, no, you will be dealing with all these grounds, the ready reference grounds which can be used typically. So I think that will be really interesting for anybody who wants to clear the AOR examination. The EBC learning platform will be very, very nice. At least the crash course. I mean, you've told everything in like just 2 minutes, so most
And
definitely
everything
it
what
will be
I
insightful.
realized is, yeah, anyway, try to cover and whatever we will trouble you again and invite you for a webinar even after our crash course gets over because we will make everything available to the participants till 25th December. So
Yes, ma'am.
So we are trying to help, and AOR is very important thing. If you realize that till now we have only 3,000 odd AORs in 70 years.
That's right, ma'am. And of these, ma'am, 3,000, I think the practicing one actually remain to be very handful. A lot of them have been designated as senior advocates. A lot of them are judges now, and not many are. Quite a few are not practicing. So I think this examination definitely gives a scope to it. At least it changed my life. After becoming an AOR, it definitely changed my life. So I think all the best to everybody who's going to take this examination. I'm sure you'll find that it is the most important and the most significant examination that you'll ever take if you are looking at making a career in litigation.
Right, and even for the sitting Supreme Court judges, if you see, many of them have been AORs.
In AORs, that's true, ma'am. Justice Khanvilkar, Justice Lalit, all of them.
Yes.
Justice Indu Malhotra.
Yeah.
Meenakshi ma'am was also, I think, as in the senior advocate, Meenakshi ma'am was also an AOR. So it's just nice to see so many people. I think our honorable president was an AOR, no, ma'am?
Mr. Prakash Singh, I'm not very sure, but Yeah,
I don't know
Justice
if
Court
people-
was
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Justice Muralidhar
So,
was
Justice Amrita, yes, yes, definitely, ma'am. What an
Indu
amazing.
Mahalingam was just the very busy AORs of Supreme Court.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. As far as getting a designation also for senior advocate, I think it's a great thing. If you look at it just now, also this thing that has the elevations that have happened just now from the bar, a lot, quite a lot of them are AORs who've been elevated to different high courts. I'm sorry I'm taking away so much time, but it was just lovely talking to everybody today, and I hope that I've been able to at least contribute a little bit to everybody's rising future, and all the best to everyone for their examination.
Thank you so much, Pallavi, for your time. And all the
Thank you,
best.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Dua.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.